Get out of my locker room now. Let's go. Get out of my locker room now. Get out.
Daniel Puder was part of WWE Tough Enough, an initiative launched by the WWE to find pro wrestling stars of the future. Tough Enough started as a reality show that aired on MTV, but in 2004, Season 4 moved the hopefuls onto the Smackdown brand, seeing as the Raw brand was conducting a Diva Search contest. Daniel Puder had an MMA background, and when I say MMA background, I mean he had one professional fight before joining Tough Enough. Daniel said he got into, quote, ultimate fighting during his Tough Enough promos, and many people thought this meant he actually fought in the UFC, but no, Puder had never competed in the UFC organization. Daniel was only 22 years old when he joined Tough Enough, so as far as his pro fight experience was concerned, he was still very much only beginning in 2004. He did wrestle in high school. He began his MMA and pro wrestling training at the age of 16. So really, when Daniel was first presented to WWE audiences, he was still just a kid that had a seemingly bright future. Daniel met Kurt Angle in a WWE ring for an unscripted shoot fight. This fight has become quite infamous because Daniel got the better of Angle while almost breaking his arm. You'd think this would earn Daniel respect among his peers and respect from the WWE locker room, but this is pro wrestling, a world where respect is given and earned in some of the most backwards ways you could possibly imagine. There really is two sides to this story, Daniel's side and the side of the whole pro wrestling business, and with this in mind, reports about Daniel's behaviour after he won Tough Enough didn't paint him in the best light either. Daniel Puder was not the most endearing person in the world, and any sympathy you may have had for Puder gets quickly flushed down the toilet the moment he started talking. But let's look at all this in today's video. This is the Kurt Angle vs Daniel Puder shoot match that happened on WWE Smackdown. The Tough Enough contestants were featured on Smackdown, where they would compete in different tasks. Al Snow, the Tough Enough trainer, wanted to ensure that every one of these challenges was somewhat scripted, or at least had some sort of reassurance that neither the contestants nor the WWE looked bad when these tasks were completed. For example, Vince McMahon wanted the Tough Enough contestants to compete in a Big Show body slam challenge. Snow told McMahon that this was a bad idea because not all the guys knew how to sell yet, and so Al proposed that the contestants take a chop each from the Big Show instead. If you take a chop, you have no choice but to sell it. Vince still went ahead with having the Big Show body slam the contestants, and so naturally, one of the guys just got right back up after taking this devastating move, and according to Al Snow, the Big Show got pissed off. Nick Mitchell ended up taking one for the team when Show slapped him across the face, and again, according to Al Snow, this was completely unscripted. So you can see why the WWE needed to control these Tough Enough segments, and you can see why some safeguards needed to be put in place, not just for the contestants, but also for the WWE pro wrestlers and for the sake of the SmackDown show itself. One of the segments would feature Kurt Angle giving the Tough Enough contestants an opportunity to grapple with the Olympic gold medalist himself, and to get this opportunity, the guys had to perform squat thrusts until they couldn't stand anymore. The last man standing would then get a prize, which would get revealed after the challenge had been completed. Before the challenge took place, Angle spoke to Daniel Puder. Angle said he knows of Daniel's background, he knows he's in the UFC, which was completely wrong, though I do need to clear this up because I'm sure people will talk about it in the comments. Back then, the term UFC and the term Ultimate Fighter was kinda used as a blanket term for anyone who competed in mixed martial arts at a pro level. Yeah, it is kinda ignorant, but folks would just say UFC or Ultimate Fighter is a way to describe anyone who had legitimate MMA experience. Daniel Puder was not in any way, shape or form associated with the UFC. Anyway, Angle got in Puder's face. Daniel made sure to call Kurt sir, and when Daniel said he had never faced an Olympic champion before, Kurt said Daniel didn't want to because Angle would kick his ass. The Miz also made the mistake of laughing at one of Kurt's jokes, so the Olympic hero gave Miz a shove. The smile got wiped off Miz's face, and then the challenge got underway. Chris Naraki won the challenge. He was then told seconds later that his prize was a match against Kurt Angle himself, which would begin immediately. And seeing as the Tough Enough contestants weren't smartened up as to what was going to happen after the squat thrust competition, the match that took place was pretty much a shoot. The guys weren't told beforehand that they could end up in a match. They weren't told if they were going to win or lose. So Kurt had to take the guys down, rough them up a little, and get a quick pinfall win. According to Angle, Vince McMahon specifically told him to not fight Daniel Puder. And if you look back at the squat thrust competition closely, you can see that Daniel should have actually won the contest, seeing as he was still going strong while Chris was almost throwing up. The referees eliminated Daniel for having poor form, but Chris's form was way, way worse.
Vince wanted me to do this shoot thing with the Tough Enough group, and Daniel Puder was one of them. And the one thing Vince told me though beforehand, he said, "I know your neck's messed up. I know you can't feel your arms. Just don't pick Daniel Puder." So when you tell me not to pick somebody, guess what? I'm gonna pick that person.
So Angle defeated Chris Naraki while also fracturing one of Chris's ribs in the process. Another little tidbit that seems to get left out when people talk about this incident. Chris ended up in hospital until 4 in the morning due to this unscripted fight that took place on Smackdown. But at least it was over and the guys could go back to their training, right? Wrong. Kurt Angle wanted to fight Daniel Puder and Puder wanted to fight Angle. Angle asked if anyone else wanted to step inside the ring and Daniel put his hand up. So the match got underway and immediately Kurt had a much tougher time getting Daniel off his feet. The initial grapple went on for much longer and the moment Kurt tried to take Puder down, Daniel got right back up. Daniel was then able to hook Angle's arm. He was going for a Kimura. Angle was now in a lot of trouble, so he brought Daniel down to the mat, but Daniel also got the Kimura fully locked in. Panic stations right here for Kurt. He was at risk of getting his arm broke in the middle of a WWE ring, and if it wasn't for referee Jimmy Cordes running over to count a pinfall, Angle would have been even further embarrassed by this young kid. It's important to remember that there's no such thing as a 3 count in amateur wrestling. Daniel's shoulder blades needed to be on the mat for just 1 second for Kurt to win, but Jimmy Cordes counted the 3 anyway, even though Daniel's shoulders were up by the time the official came over for the count. Even though this type of pinfall isn't seen in an amateur wrestling match, Jimmy still saved Kurt from getting his arm broke as Daniel let go of the Kimura when Jimmy counted to 3. But it's also very important to note that not once did Angle or anyone else explain the rules of these shoot fights before they took place. Daniel didn't know it was an amateur wrestling match and neither did folks at home. Also, had Cordes only slapped the mat once instead of 3 times, fans would have been very confused. Pro wrestling fans have been trained to think that a pinfall consists of a 3 count, and they've seen this their entire lives, so it is what it is. Had the referee counted to 1, then told Daniel to let go of the submission hold, then fans would have thought Puder got screwed over. In short, it was a mess, an absolute mess that the WWE and Kurt Angle intentionally put themselves in.
It just popped in my head, count. So I counted 3, but upon further review, thinking back, they were having an amateur type contest. I could have just counted 1 because in amateur wrestling, that's all you have to do. I was counting 3 regardless. This thing was going to end, even though Puder got his shoulder up after 2. I'm counting 3. I don't care.
The 2 got up, Daniel tried to shake Kurt's hand, but Angle was incredibly pissed off. He asked Daniel if he didn't know any better, he called Daniel fucking stupid, he mentioned something about this being a wrestling contest, so I don't think Kurt was expecting a submission hold. And then he told Puder to get out of his face while Puder said, "Yes sir." Kurt then told the contestants that none of them were tough enough, and the segment came to an end with Angle still looking seriously annoyed. The Angle vs Puder fight was totally legitimate. You don't need confirmation from folks involved in the business because you can just see it's real by looking at it. Kurt went backstage and it's been reported that he blew a gasket, but I don't think Vince McMahon would have given much sympathy, seeing as McMahon told Kurt not to fight Daniel and Kurt didn't listen. It's also kind of weird that the WWE didn't just completely cut the Angle vs Puder fight out of their taped Smackdown broadcast, seeing as they had all the footage they needed from the Angle vs Chris Naraki fight. But the whole world saw what happened when Daniel Puder fought Kurt Angle, and it became big news as soon as Smackdown aired on TV. The way I see it, and I know it won't be popular, but the way I see it, Daniel didn't do anything wrong. He just watched Kurt and Naraki compete in a shoot wrestling match. Angle asked if anyone else wants to join in. Daniel volunteered, and he reacted to the situation he was in while wrestling Angle in the ring. It must be stated and repeated too that Kurt didn't mention once that this was strictly amateur wrestling and that there were only pinfalls without any sort of submissions. Daniel was also under the impression that the only rule was simply no striking, so had the actual rules of the match been specified with at least a little bit of detail, I'm pretty sure things would have played out differently. So as much as I love Kurt Angle, and as much as Daniel turned into his own biggest fan over this whole thing, on the night itself, I don't think Puder did anything wrong. The best way to sum it up really is that Kurt Angle would have been declared the winner had this been an amateur wrestling match with a competent amateur referee. If it was an MMA fight not held in a WWE ring, then Angle would have topped out before Puder broke his arm. The main problem here though is that Kurt couldn't top because that's not what this WWE segment was supposed to be, and there's no way Kurt would have gave up to a WWE rookie on WWE television. He would have let Daniel break his arm before that happened. In all fairness too, Angle was also dealing with injuries. He wasn't at 100%, but then again, this should have gave Kurt even more reason not to wrestle a guy trained in mixed martial arts on national TV. Nothing good was ever gonna come of it. What's sometimes forgotten is the fact that the WWE tried to blow the guys up even before they got to the ring. It was Bruce Pritchard's idea to make the guys eat pasta, drink milk, do push-ups, squats, then sprint up and down a very long ramp. It almost sounds like the company were putting the Tough Enough contestants through hell just to ensure this Kurt Angle confrontation went off without a hitch. Here's some audio from Pritchard's podcast.
What you have to do is, I went old school. This is where I did get involved because I went back to the Gene Anderson and style of training guys. But for this competition, my idea was, I said, well, we need to run them. We got to blow them up first. So we took them back, and there was a ramp backstage, and we made them run sprints up and down the ramp. Then we made them do these squat thrusts and all this other shit. But we had them sprint forever until they were dragging. Then once they ran the sprints, we took them in and fed them fettuccine Alfredo. So the contest in there was you got to eat so many bowls of this heavy, creamy fettuccine Alfredo. So now you're stuffing your face with fettuccine Alfredo, and the only thing that they had to drink, they had like two, not gallons, but the next smaller size of milk that you had to wash it down with. So you had to eat what was in front of you. You had to eat the fettuccine Alfredo, and you had to wash it down with the milk. Now, and one of them may have been buttermilk as well. So now you've been running like crazy. You've eaten all this pasta, drank all this milk. Now let's go run again. You run them some more. We've made them do squats. Now it's time for them to go out and do the competition thing. So now they got to do the squat thrusts and all that other crap. And the idea was to blow them up.
Pritchard also said that Puder didn't eat all his pasta, he didn't sprint up the ramp, and instead he just jogged. But what were the WWE gonna do? They couldn't eliminate him off screen, you know? Pritchard also warned Angle not to choose Puder because Daniel was conserving his energy, but Bruce also fully admits that the WWE should never have put themselves in this situation in the first place. He admits it was stupid. Kurt shouldn't have offered Daniel the opportunity to fight him, and he also blames Paul Heyman for getting in the Angle's ear and convincing him to do this bit on Smackdown. Let's not forget too that Angle at this point in his career was a pro wrestler. He wasn't the same guy who competed in the Olympics, and he had been dealing with a ton of injuries. Daniel Puder was a young kid fresh off MMA training and his first pro MMA fight. Reports state that Daniel didn't get any heat backstage after this match took place. Kurt Angle wasn't viewed any lesser by his peers, even though he was pissed off when he returned to the locker room. Puder and Angle did not have a great relationship moving forward, and there were rumours that Dana White tried to sign both Angle and Puder for a fight inside the octagon, but Kurt decided instead to sign with TNA. Puder believes that the Athletic Commission wouldn't have let Kurt fight anyway.
I had an interview with Kurt Angle earlier this year, and he told me that you guys had a UFC match lined up. It was going to be you versus him, and this thing was going to happen. And then Kurt had just signed with Impact Wrestling, and obviously his contract wouldn't make that happen.
That's cool. I never got a contract on that one.
Were you part of any discussion like this?
There were minor discussions, but I never talked to Did I talk to Dana about that? I think I might have. I think somebody might talk to me. I don't think I had a conversation with Dana. I think that he had a conversation with Dana about it. I would have taken the fight, but at the end of the day, if he's taking that much Vicodin that he says he takes in another interview, I don't think he would pass the drug test.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: he's broken his neck.
Yeah.
You try to get the athletic commission to approve. How old is he now? 75? 80? No, I'm joking. This thing. He's like what, about 55, 60 now?
I don't think he's 50 yet.
Oh wow.
Daniel's next match took place at Armageddon 2004, a Dixie dog fight against fellow Tough Enough competitor The Miz. Miz and Puder were the final two Tough Enough competitors, and this was going to be both guys' last opportunity to impress WWE fans. The night after this, voting would open up and the fans were going to choose who they thought should win Tough Enough in a cool $1 million prize pot that was going to be spread over a 4-year contract. This was another legit fight, though thankfully precautions were taken this time. Both guys had protective gear. This was going to be contested as a boxing match. 3 1-minute rounds, no standing 8 count, no 3 knockdown rule. Boxers can't be saved by the bell in any round, and there's a mandatory 8 count for a knockdown. Miz didn't have the same fight experience as Puder, but he still managed to hang in there for the full 3 minutes. Fans in attendance decided that Puder won the match, seeing as there were no judges put in place, but the whole thing just wasn't all that great to watch. On the following episode of Smackdown, Daniel was chosen as the winner of Tough Enough, and Daniel got broke into WWE by having his first 2 house show matches against Hardcore Holly. I don't want to speculate and say the WWE were trying to test Daniel Puder here, but come on, let's be real. Hardcore Holly and Tough Enough contestants don't exactly go hand in hand, do they? Next up was the Royal Rumble match where Daniel entered at number 3, and reports state that Daniel got a bit cocky backstage and a few guys wanted to teach him a lesson. As the story goes, well, according to Kurt Angle, Daniel was walking around telling people he was in the Royal Rumble main event, which technically wasn't a lie. The Rumble did headline the pay-per-view in 2005, but even you guys watching this video know the drill. If you say the main event during the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, you really mean the big championship match, and besides, it's not like Daniel was a big deal or anything. He was there to make up the numbers like many other guys in the Rumble match. And so when folks heard Daniel say backstage he was in the main event, it kinda rubbed everyone the wrong way. Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit entered at number 1 and number 2 respectively, and Daniel found himself in a world of hurt the moment he stepped into the ring at number 3. Eddie, Chris and Hardcore Holly, who entered at number 4, decided to legitimately chop the shit out of Daniel, and all 3 men took pleasure in doing so. They chopped him so hard that his chest began to bruise. Puder had no prior knowledge that this was going to happen. There's nothing Daniel could do because it's not like it's an MMA fight. In reality, he's in the ring with 3 veterans of the pro wrestling business who take the pro wrestling business very, very seriously. And so Daniel was beaten up in the ring before getting sent over the top rope. He lasted around 4 minutes.
If Daniel Puder thought that they took advantage of him, I'd say he was right. The physicality, you're getting chopped on the pecs. It's not like you're going to go to the hospital over it. So I don't remember anybody getting any. I mean, it probably was addressed, but more than likely in that era, it was addressed in a way that you're kind of laughing about it. As far as it went. What are you going to say? What are you going to do? Don't do that again? You're an adult. You're a professional. I'd like for you not to do that again. It goes against time immemorial of how talents were broken in, especially with talents that had a real tough guy reputation. How tough are they? And so those 3 guys, Benoit and Eddie and Bob, decided to find out just how tough this kid was. I'm sure that the offenders were motivated to make their point perfectly clear, but couldn't do that today. Couldn't do it today at all.
There really is 2 ways of looking at this. Due to the reputation Daniel had and how he carried himself in quite a cocky manner, some would say Daniel totally deserved what happened to him. The word that got out in the newsletters and the dirt sheets certainly painted Daniel as the real bad guy in all this. Inside the ring, you've got guys who paid a serious amount of dues to get where they are, and here's some kid who just took a shortcut, a kid who got himself $1 million, and a kid who's apparently been bragging quite a lot backstage to his peers. On the other hand, you could see this as bullying on live TV by veterans who should have known better. It's no secret that the WWF guys weren't overly keen on these young cats getting contracts through Tough Enough, and it wouldn't be long before The Miz got completely cut off from the men's locker room too. So yeah, you're either going to think Daniel got what he deserved, or you're going to think he was hazed in a pretty inappropriate and public manner. Jim Ross was 100% right, this would never happen in today's pro wrestling, but for some reason, there's very little people online these days who show sympathy towards Puder, and I think that's because of two things. One, he had a bad attitude, or a perceived bad attitude, and two, he wasn't in the WWE all that long, so it doesn't really matter, he's all but forgotten about now. Whatever the case, after the Rumble fiasco, Daniel was pretty much done on the full-time roster. The plan was to send him to developmental so he could learn how to work and probably go through a little attitude adjustment, but he wouldn't even last a year in OVW. Daniel had his first OVW match on the 27th of June 2005, teaming up with Ken Anderson to defeat James Smith and Jason Neely. As time went on, Puder became very disenchanted with the whole OVW experience, and he decided he was going to give it all up. He was going to cut ties with World Wrestling Entertainment and go down a different path. In an interview with Dave Doyle of Yahoo Sports, Puder said, "I was in OVW and we had this one town in Kentucky we went to every week. It was basically an old barn. There were the same 20 people there every time. They all looked the same, they all had maybe 3 teeth each, and they all had the same name. Finally, one night I walked in and saw all the inbreds and thought to myself, what am I doing with my life?" OVW commentator and manager Kenny Bolin saw things a bit differently though. In a reply to Daniel's comments in the Yahoo Sports article, Kenny said, "I really liked Daniel during his OVW days. He was not too smart at the wrestling business, but what young talent is these days. My memories of Daniel Puder in OVW are quite different than what was stated in your article. He was always giving away free pics, trading cards and t-shirts of himself to the fans. He spent a fortune on this stuff and he gave it to the fans, not to mention the 20 in a barn he claims to have seen every week. If he had not dozed off in training class and stayed off his laptop and cell phone 24/7, he may have drew more than the 20 fans in whatever town he thinks he was in. I also remember Daniel cried like a baby the day he got released from WWE. Daniel may want to reflect on his OVW days more accurately and appreciate any fans who took the time to come out and see him in the future." Puder wasn't done in pro wrestling though, and he wasn't done in MMA either. In 2006, he returned to MMA at the inaugural Strikeforce event where he won his fight via submission. He would continue to fight until 2009 and he'd finish up with an 8-win undefeated record. As for pro wrestling, Daniel worked 2 dates for Ring of Honor in 2008, and in 2010 he had a 5-month stint in New Japan Pro Wrestling, kicking it off with a match against Shinsuke Nakamura at Dominion, which Puder lost. Daniel gave up on wrestling after this NJPW run, though he did wrestle an attraction match in 2019, and today he's become quite the businessman. He founded My Life, My Power in 2010, a community-driven company that helps schools, police departments and parents to stop bullying through self-empowerment. He has a non-profit that donates fitness gear to underprivileged teenagers. He opened up his own gym in California. He even joined the San Francisco Sheriff Department in Arkansas, and he was into branding and marketing even before he entered WWE's Tough Enough contest. No matter what you may think of the guy, he's ended up doing pretty well for himself, and the community work he undertakes is something you simply can't knock nor criticise. So this kind of shows us that Daniel matured quite a lot, and that's where I think the main issue lies in all this. It all comes down to age and experience. Daniel Puder was so young when he got involved in the cutthroat wrestling business, and not only was he ill prepared for the locker room, what with his ego and whatnot, he also put Kurt Angle in a real difficult spot. Really, the writing was on the wall as soon as Daniel applied that Kimura, and it was only a matter of time before Daniel got his receipt. Kurt Angle didn't even have to get his own payback either, the other boys did it for him. On the flip side, by all accounts, and even by watching Puder's interviews from all those years ago, you can tell he was arrogant and the kid was full of himself. They say you have to have a certain degree of confidence to make it in the pro wrestling business, but back then, there was a very, very fine line between confidence and being an arrogant prick. Daniel's ego was kinda out of control for someone so new to the business, so again, you can see why things turned out the way they did. Not saying it was right or wrong, it's just the way things were back then. It's very easy to side with guys like Angle and Guerrero because those were the guys we would root and cheer for every week, and it's easy to laugh at Puder and brush him off as another failed newcomer who got too big for his boots. But personally, I really would have liked to have seen Angle and Puder make some money together by having a proper storyline in pro wrestling. They could have went in so many directions by booking a series of matches between these two, and it's kinda shocking that McMahon didn't put them in the ring again, at least for some revenge for Angle, but yeah, there you go. The moral of the story is, don't put veterans in shoot submission holes, and maybe think about keeping your ego in check when you're so new to the business, especially during this era. Think about this for a moment too. Daniel may have won Tough Enough, but the guy who had the most longevity was runner-up The Miz. And seeing as the WWE didn't have to pay Daniel the full $1 million for winning Tough Enough, and they paid Miz a smaller salary during his first years in the company, well, it all kinda worked out for WWE in the end, didn't it? They saved money, they were able to groom The Miz into a rather stereotypical WWE superstar, and they had the perfect excuse to get rid of someone who wasn't very popular in the locker room. Thank you for watching everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please take care.